By 1864, Paraguay was not just a country, it was a psychological experiment in total state control. Under the López dynasty, it had been sealed from the outside world, debt-free, militarized from birth, and fed a single belief from childhood that Paraguay was chosen, surrounded by enemies, and could only survive through absolute loyalty to its leader. Francisco Solano López inherited this machine, and the first thing he did was pointed at the world. He was not a military genius. He was something far more dangerous. A man who had studied Napoleon not as a strategist, but as an identity, and who had spent years constructing a version of himself that his nation could not survive without. In November 1864, he launched simultaneous war against Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. He did not consult his generals. He did not calculate what 10-to-1 odds meant in blood. He moved, because in his mind, there was no version of Francisco Solano López that was not at war. And he had long since made his mind his country's mind. The Triple Alliance brought overwhelming force, a modernized Brazilian navy, professional armies resupplied by sea, and a combined population advantage that made the outcome a mathematical certainty from the opening shot. At Tuiuti, May 1866, López threw 23,000 men at entrenched positions. Over 6,000 died before the afternoon was finished. The river ran red for 2 days. He did not adjust his strategy. He reinforced the belief, told his people the enemy would erase them, their language, their identity, their existence. And because that belief had been built into them since childhood, they accepted it. As the army bled out in the marshes, the draft age collapsed, then disappeared entirely. Boys who had never held a rifle were handed one and told to march. And they marched, because the only thing more terrifying than the front line was what retreat would mean, for everything they had been told they were. Allied commanders sent dispatches back home, describing soldiers who continued to advance after wounds that should have ended any fight, not from military discipline, but from a terror so deep that it had replaced the survival instinct entirely. By 1868, the adult male population was functionally gone. On August 16, 1869, at Acosta New, López deployed 3,500 soldiers, the majority of them boys, some as young as 9, armed with wooden replicas painted black, soot and animal hair pressed on their trembling faces to manufacture the illusion of veterans from a distance. When Brazilian cavalry closed the gap and saw clearly what they were facing, several refused to charge. The order was eventually enforced. Approximately 2,000 boys gone in a single day. That was not a battle. That was a nation feeding its last generation into a machine its leader refused to switch off. López retreated north with whatever remained, wounded soldiers and starving women and orphaned survivors, moving through interior jungle with no supply line and no destination except to keep López alive. Starvation arrived within weeks, cholera followed, and then paranoia completed the collapse from the inside. López began executing his own officers on charges of treason backed by nothing. His brother was shot, priests were killed, foreign diplomats were tortured for confessions they could not give because the conspiracies did not exist. Hundreds died not from Brazilian bullets, but from the firing squads of the man they were still following through the jungle. They kept following because López had become the last fixed point in a world that had dissolved around them, and to stop moving was to confront the full weight of everything that had already been lost. On March 1st, 1870, at the banks of the Aquidaba-Nigui River, Brazilian cavalry closed the cordon at dawn. López was cornered, wounded, and surrounded by his last men. He refused evacuation. He refused surrender. He drove his horse into the river and was cut down by a lance at close range. His final words were, "Muero con mi patria," I die with my fatherland. He was not speaking poetry. He was stating a fact he had engineered over 6 years. Paraguay's population had fallen from 525,000 to 221,000. Of those survivors, only 28,000 were adult males, 4 to 1 women for every 1 man. A generation deleted. The women rebuilt it. They were called Las Residentas, and they did it without infrastructure, without aid, and without the men who had been taken from them by a war none of them had asked for. They broke the ground, preserved the language, rebuilt the markets, and raised the next generation in a country where the concept of a father had become something closer to mythology. Paraguay survived, but what the War of the Triple Alliance left behind was not just a damaged country, it was the clearest case study in recorded history of what becomes possible when a leader successfully merges his identity with a nation's identity so completely that the population loses the ability to distinguish between serving their country and serving his ego. López did not sacrifice himself for Paraguay. He sacrificed Paraguay for the portrait of himself he had been painting since the day he took power. And the silence that settled over that jungle in 1870 was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a calculation completed, the final cost of one man's refusal to accept that he was wrong, paid in full with the lives of an entire generation. That silence still echoes, and if you listen carefully enough, it still has something to teach.